welcome. It's my utmost pleasure to welcome all of you to the virtual launch of LightCastle Business Confidence Index 2019-20. My name is Ibrahim, and I am the Managing Director of LightCastle Partners. I'm so excited to be a part of this launching ceremony today. First of all, thanks a lot. Thank you so much to our esteemed panelists and our respected guests who are showing up today আমাদের এই ইভেন্টটাতে because we believe that for the future of Bangladesh, this is going to be a very important study that we want to launch today. And your presence and your participation in analyzing the findings that are going to come about from the study will chart the next wave for Bangladesh to come out of this turbulence that we're currently facing. So as you all know, amra jodi ekটু briefly just apnake amader little bit of background about ourselves. You know, at LightCastle, we are a consulting firm, and over the last 7 years, we have been working with the private sector and the development partners to create data-driven opportunities for them for growth and impact. So amra Bangladesher private sector er sathe খুবই একটা crucially and very interdependently কাজ করি because we believe that private sector growth will take Bangladesh to the next level, as we can see in all the emerging countries. However, we all know that COVID has struck and it has brought about a lot of challenges আমাদের economy. You know, from LightCastle, we believe in democratizing data. And আমরা যখন এই ধরনের ডেটা গুলো আমরা আগে করেছি, business confidence index is not for the first time that we're doing as a consulting firm that you know, takes responsibility and believes in empowerment of its citizens and business leaders by giving them a tool which they can use to make good decisions, good business decisions.
We are having difficulty hearing you.
If that we can hear you. Maybe it's an internet connectivity problem.
That all of your participation years. Now this year, unfortunately, আমাদের একটা presentation. Hello. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. I had an internet connectivity. My sincere apologies. So as I was just saying that, you know, in 2016, for the first time ever, we started the Business Confidence Index. And over the last few years, আমরা এটার একটা পর একটা edition বের করেছি. So this year, unfortunately, we will see that the confidence of the private sector or the business leaders have nosedived. Eta kome geche, and for rightful reasons. And we're going to see more of that in the presentation, and we're going to see where exactly the pain points are and how can, what are the recommended steps for us to come out of this. So we tell you, I'm going to discuss in the presentation. Now, just a little bit about the agenda of the event. So this is, as the Managing Director of LightCastle Partners, I am very excited to welcome all of you and start the proceedings. I'm going to shuru korbo with a presentation of the study. And my business partner and the Director of Finance Strategy and Consulting Engagement, Zahedul Amin, will share the keynote findings of the study. এবং এরপরে my business partner, Bijon Islam, who's also the CEO of LightCastle Partners, will moderate a panel. যেখানে we have Masrur Bhai as the Chairman of Policy Exchange, Nihad as the President of MCCI, Asif Bhai as the Chairman of Chittagong Stock Exchange, and Dr. Nasir Uddin Ahmed as the former chairman of NBR. So, you know, this panel, we want to take your views from different angles that play very important roles in the development of the private sector. আমরা regulatory side থেকে শুনতে চাই, আমরা private sector এর voice গুলো শুনতে চাই, আমরা economies and analysis, policy analysis part থেকে শুনতে চাই. So that session is going to be moderated by Bijon. And then we'll have an open floor discussion where we're going to open up and we will be able to hear and take questions from some of the people who are going to attend in this event. And towards the end, and from there, we will end today's discussion. But I just want to make sure that this is not the end. This is the beginning, because after the reviews, we want to take it to the next level. We are very privileged and honored to have 3 partners with us in this initiative. Thanks so much to Masrur Bhai and Policy Exchange for being the knowledge partner. Business Standard is here as our media partner, who's going to provide us all sort of media support to take the voices of you to the far reaches, or not just in Bangladesh, but also in the world. And Youth Policy Forum, we have them as our outreach partner. So without any further ado, I just want to get started and hand it over to my business partner, Zahed, who will share the key findings of the presentation.
Thank you, Ivdad. Let me just share my screen. Okay, great. Can you all see my screen? Yeah. Let me start. Thank you so much, Ivdad, for giving me the floor. I would roughly take around 30 minutes to broadly cover our main findings. We had the good opportunity to talk to 60 odd industry leaders, C-suite members from 25 different sectors. We wanted to understand their views about the overall economy, the directions that we are taking amid this uncertain times due to the pandemic. And we also wanted to understand their views about how their industries are going to perform in the next upcoming year in general. Before starting my presentation, I would like to thank our media partner, the Business Standard, Policy Exchange of Bangladesh, and our outreach partner, Youth Policy Forum, for supporting us all the way. Before going into the industry-specific details, I wanted to sort of like shed some light on the overall economic scenario amid this, this pandemic. We also wanted to know our interviewees' perceptions about how the economy is doing and how it's going to do in the next future. And we wanted to summarize some of the key findings. So firstly, based on the views of our esteemed interviewees and the C-suite members, they feel that the economy has been going through some turbulent times even before the pandemic in general. A number of factors had impacted that, partially due to the current scenario of the banking industry, which was going through some liquidity issues and some structural challenges. Alongside our export baskets or the export-led sectors weren't doing that well either. The export for our RMG had sort of plateaued by the end of 2019. Alongside the inward-looking sectors like the FMCG sectors and the others weren't growing as expected compared to, if you compare it with the GDP projections. And as we all know, the pandemic has really exacerbated the current scenario, and our trajectories have, to be honest, I think it's a global scenario. The growth trajectory has sort of altered. And as we know, like there has been a demand and supply side shock since there has been a general lockdown over the last 2-3 months. Production activities have been hampered. On the other side, there has been a lot of job losses, which caused a vicious cycle leading to lower demand in the economy in general. And the export-led sectors also suffered due to the overall lockdown and restrictions in export. And many of our respondents believe that the new normal will actually change the growth trajectory of their sectors in general and the economy in general. And we can see that reflection in the revised projections from the different multilateral development agencies. As we can see, the World Bank has revised their growth projections for the year 2019-20 to 1.8%. And many of the development agencies, or multilateral donor agencies, feel that our growth trajectory will be slightly altered compared to our existing projections before the pandemic. If you look at the other aspects, we can see that MSMEs have been severely impacted due to the advent of COVID, mainly due to a lack of liquidity crisis, and protection of MSMEs would be of critical importance for retaining jobs across the economy, because roughly around 75 to 80% of the population or the working population who are currently engaged are sort of like working for SMEs. And for supporting these MSMEs and also the corporates or the companies, we actually need to ensure that the financial or the banks are equipped to sort of like provide funding, because as we know, like the onus on getting back the payment remains with the banks, and if there are any inevitable defaults from some of these companies, this has to be borne by the banking system. So some kind of credit guarantee scheme would be helpful in successfully deploying the stimulus package. And investments and systems level changes are required in the healthcare system, just as we understand that the healthcare system needs a significant change, and it needs significant investment. Alongside, there has to be growth in the consumer spending, which would ideally happen if the economic activity picks up and if there are like more jobs, if new jobs are being created in the economy in general. As we know, the Bangladesh's economy is like broadly driven by two key sectors. One is the apparel sector, which contributes roughly 84% of the country's export, contributing to roughly 13 to 14% of the country's GDP. And another is the remittances, which contributes to a significant part of our FX reserve and our export, and helps balance our balance of payment book in general. As we can see, the apparel sector has gone through a significant upheaval over the last 3 to 4 months due to order cancellation, deferment, and although orders have slightly picked up, but unless the pandemic scenario sort of subside over the next 1 year, it would be sort of like we would be hard pressed to see like the pre-pandemic level of exports. So the sector would definitely go through a significant transitionary phase for the next 6 months. In terms of remittances, as we can see, although remittances have increased for this year, but there is a very high likelihood that the remittance level would actually decline in the next year. As we know that a lot of migrant workers who are residing in the GCC economies are basically planning to come back, because many of them have lost their jobs. Alongside, lower oil prices would sort of persist over the next 1 year or two because of the current economic downturn, and which would definitely lead to lower demand for blue collar workers in those economies in general. So in a sense, I think these two export-led pillars are going to go through a turbulent times over the next 1 year in general. So looking beyond the pandemic, what if the vaccine is invented, we all have access to it, which is quite a bit far away from us, at least a year away from us. But even if you look beyond the pandemic, we actually need to ensure that we get to diversify the economy, and FDIs have a big role to play in order to ensure that we have a broader export basket. And we can actually sort of like have a number of export or growth engines which would drive the economy in general. The health of the banking sector is of critical importance. As we know, the banking sector in general has been going through some turbulent times even before the pandemic, and the health of the banking sector is critical for deploying stimulus funding and for ensuring that there is higher private sector credit growth happening in the near future. And we actually need to double down on the secondary sector. As we know, like job creation remains a major challenge in the economy, and this has become a bigger challenge during the pandemic. So job creation would be of paramount importance, and the focus on the secondary sector, the Make in Bangladesh strategy, would have to be implemented. And in terms of skill development, a lot of migrant workers are expected to come back, which will create pressure on the local economy in general. So we would expect that there will be skill redevelopment and redeployment of these skilled workforce, and government has to play a big role in ensuring that these incoming and migrant workers and semi-skilled workers are retrained so that they can be redeployed in other sectors where there are new opportunities. If I go into the specific findings, we have basically covered the presentation into 3 halves. Methodology and confidence level, we'll be briefly covering about the methodology. The second part would be the economic and sector-wise insights. And the third one would be the challenges and way forward, based on our discussion with the C-suite members. In terms of the methodology, we have used the harmonized expectations indicator, which is widely used. And we have this time, due to the pandemic, we haven't been able to interview too many people. We had to resort to online mediums for interviewing many of these C-suite members. We have interviewed around 59 C-suite members between March and April 2020, and we have taken a wide variety of companies for this particular study. We have taken 15% of the respondents from the primary sector, 30% from the secondary sector, and roughly 55% from the tertiary sector. These are some of the sectors that are represented in this study, primary, both secondary and tertiary. If you look at the index, just as Ifdad was mentioning, there has been a significant dip in the business confidence, which is quite expected given the current scenario. The index has reduced to minus 19.27 from plus 43 in our previous study. And if you look at the sector-wise contribution, sector-wise index as well, we can see that the primary the confidence level in the primary sector has decreased significantly to -40. In the secondary sector, it's -30, and in the tertiary sector, it's -60 from plus 40.93 in 2017-18. As we can see, the primary sector has been hit very hard, particularly as we know the rural economy is hit very hard. On the other side, the secondary sector has also been impacted due to the pandemic and due to loss of export orders and also lower domestic demand in the economy in general. If you look at the overall investment scenario, we can actually see that in terms of current performance, as expected, almost 70%, 70 to 80% of the respondents have said that the economy over the last 6 months have not performed that well. It has moderately to substantially worse or same over the last 6 months. And in terms of the next 6 months, almost 80% believe that the performance is going to get worse over the next 6 months, and 10% believe that it's not going to be impacted, it's going to remain the same, and 10% have said that it's going to improve marginally. The most alarming part is that in terms of fresh investments, many of them, almost 45% of the respondents believe that there will be lower investments in the next upcoming 6 months, and 22% believe that there will be the same level of investments, or there will not be any change in terms of investments. While a minority, 1/3 of the respondents believe that the investment level is going to increase, and they seem to be slightly bullish in their approach. In terms of expectations for employment, almost 70% of the respondents have said that the employment level will be lower, or it will remain the same. So as we understood from our discussion, most of the respondents from the industries have said that they will not be going for hiring decisions. And some of them have also mentioned that there might be some job losses or layoffs as well. And roughly around 30% of the respondents have said that employment level would be slightly or much higher over the next 6 months. If you look at the sectors, we all know that the apparel sector has been battered by the pandemic. A lot of job losses have occurred. On the other side, the sector has lost a lot of deals. Alongside, even before the pandemic hit us in March, I think the sector started suffering due to backward linkage issues, because a lot of raw materials end up coming from China, and due to the COVID scenario, a lot of export got stuck, which also caused some issues in the economy. In general, we can see that exports have declined, which is a matter of concern. But many of the industry players have mentioned that exports are picking up. A lot of buyers are coming back for placing new orders, which is a positive sign. If you look at the overall picture of the industry, we can see some opportunities happening due to the change in strategy among proposed change in strategy among the CPOs of different buyers. There is a higher likelihood that a lot of orders might get diverted from China, and Bangladesh might be one of the main beneficiaries of that shift in order. As we know, we still have that competitive advantage in terms of lower labor cost, which is still sustaining us. We still have the access to the GSP facility, which will hopefully be with us till 2027. And there will be a likely uptick in demand for low-end products, which is quite understandable, because as we have seen that as many of the European and the US economy sort of like came out of the lockdown, spendings have actually increased. Spendings on apparel has increased, and many of them have chosen like low-priced apparels, which are usually made from Bangladesh and Vietnam and some other countries. And on the other side, in terms of weaknesses, as we know, like demand has not picked up to the pre-pandemic level. Export volumes have decreased, as we can see from the graph, and high import dependency is also a major challenge, as we have seen from our supply chain issues before pandemic hit us, and when China faced the bout of the COVID crisis. And then there is increasing global demand. We believe that there will be intense competition at the bottom rung of the market, and a number of players are coming up who are going to become more competitive. And there are other structural issues like port congestions, lack of modernization, which are impacting the lead time for export. And there has been some closure of mid-tier and smaller RMG factories in general. In terms of support, it would be expected that the government would play a more leading role in helping the suppliers or the apparel factories to negotiate better with the buyers. And also in terms of capacity development, the sector has to move up the value chain in order to produce more value-added products in the industry, which would support higher wages in the future. In terms of agro-processing, as we know, like the agro-processing has been identified as one of the key sectors by our respondents. But over the last 6 months, the sector has suffered from supply chain disruption. As we know, due to the lockdown or the general holidays, there has been a decline or there has been disruption in movement of goods from the rural to the urban markets, which has contributed to a decline in the rural income because agro inputs have decreased at the prices have decreased at the farm gate level. And international commodity prices have also gone down because since the global economy is going through a recessionary phase, all the major commodities have been experiencing a decline in pricing. In terms of opportunities, we feel that since we have a large population in Bangladesh, the population is growing at a decent pace. There will be a growing demand for agro-based products, agro-processing products in the economy in general. And mechanization is gradually happening as well. Mechanization will increase productivity across the board. And the changing consumer lifestyle will also contribute to higher demand for agro-processing sector in general. In terms of challenges, access to credit remains a major challenge. Unfair price distribution due to presence of number of middlemen who tend to capture a lot of value is sort of impacting both the end consumers and the farmers. And unavailability of transport was a major problem during the COVID pandemic. And there was asymmetric supply of workforce as well in some of these areas, which also resulted in certain challenges for the sector in general. So in terms of okay, if you move on to the next slide. So in terms of the pharmaceutical sector, as we know that although the sales have declined in the pharmaceutical sectors to the tune of roughly around 20 to 30% for the last 6 months, the sector has tremendous significant potential to grow given the pandemic scenario, because we believe our study shows that Bangladesh might actually benefit from the invention of vaccine, which would enable the Bangladeshi pharmaceutical companies to sort of like manufacture or produce these vaccines at a cheaper price. As we have seen that some of the manufacturers have already started manufacturing remdesivir, which has been exported to India and some of the other neighboring countries, and there seems to be a good opportunity. But in the short term, we have seen that there has been supply chain disruption due to lack of access of APIs from the Chinese market, which has somewhat subsided, and there has been a decline in demand because a lot of the consumers are not visiting doctors and are not no new prescriptions were being written over the last 3-4 months unless it's urgent. In terms of export, Bangladesh has performed quite well. The export level has been growing, although we had faced some significant challenges last year, but exports have increased marginally, which is a positive sign. In terms of opportunities, we believe that due to rising income and an increased health consciousness among the consumers, there will be a continued rise in demand, and due to the fact that we have the ability to produce generic drugs in general, we also have a ready-made market in the African and the European market where we can sell cheaper medicines in general. In terms of challenges, our dependencies is squarely on the Chinese and the Indian market. We have to import roughly around 90% of our APIs from the Chinese and the Indian market, which is a challenge in the supply chain. And although the government has been looking to sort of like establish an API factory or an API park in Bangladesh, not much progress have been made over the last 5 to 7 years, and there has been inadequate investment in research and development as well. In terms of leather and footwear, we can see that the sector has suffered partially due to supply chain disruption. As we know, like many of the shops have been closed for the last 3-4 months. People have reduced their discretionary spending, so domestic spendings on footwear has significantly declined. On the other side, exports have also declined in tandem, but it's expected that the international market will rebound in the next 6 months, which will lead to higher exports in the upcoming year. But it's expected that it will probably not reach the pre-pandemic level in terms of export and demand unless the situation normalizes. In terms of opportunities, there is a large local and global demand. Based on our interviews with the industry players, we found out that our demand would definitely increase because a number of players might move from Vietnam. Number of buyers might move from Vietnam to Bangladesh in order to order more products. On the other side, the government incentives are also in tune with the sector's requirement, and we also enjoy GSP facilities in the EU market. In terms of challenges, as I have mentioned, there has been a weak demand due to the pandemic. The backward linkage is a bit of a challenge, and there is there is unavailability of skilled personnel and certified suppliers in general. In terms of the tannery sector, although most of these tanneries have been shifted to the industrial park uh, due to the incomplete CTP. A lot of the lot of the tanneries are failing to sort of export to the international market because many of them are not accepting the products which do not have the required environmental safety standards. In terms of the FMCG sector, the sector in general has suffered to some extent, but demand for essential products have gone up because people had the tendency to hoard up on some of the essential products. But for the non-essential products, there has been a steep decline. For example, for one of the FMCG players, the representative from the FMCG player mentioned that demand for beauty products have significantly declined, while demand for home care have increased at a very significant pace. But it's expected that sales is going to rebound over the next 6 months. However, it's expected that it's not going to reach the pre-pandemic level, given the fact that there has been a large hit in terms of employment generation, and there will be lesser demand for FMCG products in the coming future. And as we have seen, a lot of players are actually exploring digital channels for selling their product due to closure of mom and pop shops and other physical infrastructure. In terms of the financial sector, I've mentioned a bit about this. NPLs, rising NPL has been a major challenge in the banking sector, which has contributed to liquidity issues in general. On the other side, the sector has also been facing from corporate governance issue, which have resulted in high NPLs. So it's expected that this sector is going to recover, but this would also be a main question for the panelists as well about how this sector can be recovered, or how can this sector be sort of like supported by the government in general. And this sector will definitely play a critical role in delivering the stimulus package that is going to be deployed by the government. In terms of opportunities, we believe that fintech has a major role to play. A number of top players, banks have already launched their apps for doing transactions, and there is also a scope for agent banking in the near future, which we see as major opportunities. In terms of challenges, we feel that liquidity crisis is a major challenge. Although the government has altered the CRR and SLR rate, liquidity crisis still remains a challenge, and there are some innate inertia among the commercial banks in terms of deploying funding during this particular period. And as I have mentioned, non-performing loan is a major problem. And then there are certain challenges in terms of capital market as well. The capital market has not been performing well over the last 2 years, and this scenario has persisted, for forcing the government to sort of put up a price floor in order to stabilize pricing. But seems like the sector or the capital market index will remain at this level for the foreseeable future. And it was expected that the corporate tax would be reduced in this year's budget, at least for the commercial banks, which hasn't happened. But this would actually have encouraged the banks to sort of like take a bit more risk in terms of lending to the SMEs and the other segments as well.
Zahid, if I may interject for a second, we have about 2 to 3 more minutes left for the presentation.
Sure. I'll try to sort of speed up and complete this within the next five minutes. So in terms of the power sector, as we know, like currently due to the COVID scenario, there has been a significant decline in demand for power. There is a large demand supply gap at this point in time, but there are certain challenges in terms of energy distribution and development, and ACC development hasn't panned out as expected, which has which has led to lower demand from the secondary sector. And among the different players, there is a fear that some of the existing power plants, particularly quick rental power plants under the PP arrangements, which would actually sort of like expire after a certain period, will not be renewed by the government. It already has started to happen for some of the players, and it's probably going to happen, and that's one of the fears. And some of the power players have mentioned that there has been a slight decline in their income, although they are getting the capacity payment for even keeping the factories or keeping their power plants idle, but they believe that they get around % of the revenue from the fuel cost, which they are not getting due to the pandemic. In terms of the ICT sector is probably one of the few sectors which has directly benefited from this pandemic. The ICT sector leaders are quite bullish about the current scenario. They feel that a lot of automations would happen in the near future, and there will be a larger demand for their services. Many of the players have experienced higher demand. On the other side, they believe that lack of skilled manpower would be a major challenge for the growth of this sector. If I may move on to the next slide. So we have basically asked them what are the main specific challenges for these for them in general. Majority of them have stated that access to funding is their main challenge, followed by diminishing demand for their services for most of the players, and they believe that there is a pessimistic perception. So they feel that consumers are holding up on a lot of their spendings, which is leading to lower demand. Inadequate infrastructure has been identified as one of the main bottlenecks, followed by policy inconsistencies. In terms of the sectors, we have basically asked our respondents about the top sectors they think will make a big difference in the next decade. Many of them, majority of them have identified the pharmaceutical sector as the most promising sector, followed by agriculture and agro-processing, and then ICT, logistics, and digital financial services. If you do a comparison between the BCI studies, we can see that pharmaceuticals has moved up from the third option to the first option. Agro-processing has maintained its position. And among the other sectors, ICT sector is still promising, but many of them are not that bullish about the ICT sector, ITCT and ITS sector. And the new entrants are the logistics and the digital financial service sector. If you look at the key recommendations, as we can see that we have low debt to GDP ratio, and also our FX reserve is quite healthy. So we can actually sort of seek funding opportunities from the multilateral donor agencies. The government has already received significant funding, but there is a lot of scope for getting additional funding in order to sort of stabilize the economy, which would be eventually spent on stabilized economy and for social security in general. We believe that maybe if the LDC status or the graduation can be deferred beyond 2024, it might help us shore up our current scenario. We believe that value chain has to, the RMG sector has to move up the value chain in order to come up with more value-added services, and which would give them higher margins. The export basket has to be diversified in order to ensure that we have a wide mix of products that we export, so that even if one sector goes down, there will be other sectors which would sort of support the economy in general. We believe that the MSME sector has to be supported through stimulus fundings, and the banks have to be incentivized so that SMEs get the required funding, and workers have to be retrained, particularly those who are coming back from abroad and the redundant workers who are seeking jobs. That brings me to the end of my presentation. I would like to thank my colleagues who have worked really hard on this particular publication. We would like to thank the 60 odd respondents who have given their time for this particular study, and we would like to thank our partners as well who have helped us out during this study process. Thank you so much. Over to you, Iftad.
Zahid, thank you so much for sharing the key insights from the study. We really appreciate it. And as you have seen, there is glimmer of hope. While yes, our confidence has nosedived from plus 43 in 2017-18 to negative 19.27 in 2019-20, it is understandable under the circumstances that we're going through. But I think this is where we need voices of our business and economic stalwarts to help us shape the right policies and inform business leaders on how we can take our economy up from where we are right now. And I think that is a perfect segue for me to introduce all of you to the next stage of this event that we're organizing. And I want to invite my business partner and CEO of LightCastle, Bijan Islam, who's going to be moderating a very important panel discussion with some key luminaries from Bangladesh that we have today. And I will leave it up to Bijan to introduce our panelists and get the show going. Thank you. Over to you, Bijan.
Thank you, Iftad, and thanks everyone for joining. We're really grateful. I know it's joining in the middle of the day on a very busy day and just start of the weekend. I would like to invite our respected panelists. I will just do a short introduction and then dive into the conversation. First of all, I would like to welcome Dr. Masrur Reaz, founder and chairman, Policy Exchange Bangladesh. Dr. M. Masrur Reaz is an economist and chairman of Policy Exchange Bangladesh. Earlier, he was a program manager, finance, competitiveness, innovation, global practice at the World Bank Group. Dr. Masrur, since 2012, headed World Bank Group's investment climate reform program in Bangladesh. He was the task team leader for World Bank Group's Doing Business reform program in India, which helped India to recently secure its largest ever improvement in the Doing Business ranking. Please join me in welcoming Dr. M. Masrur Reaz. Next, thank you, Masrur Bhai. Next, I would like to move on to and welcome Ms. Nihad Kabir, President, MCCI. Barrister Nihad Kabir is a Bangladeshi business leader, lawyer, and educator. She is well known for being one of the prominent women lawyers in Bangladesh. She is an advocate of the Supreme Court of Bangladesh and currently serves as the President of Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Dhaka, since 2017. She is also senior partner at Said Ict Ahmed and Associates and independent director of BRAC Bank and Bikash, among others. Barrister Nihad Kabir, thank you for joining our session. Welcome to the panel.
Thank you for having me here.
Next, I would like to welcome Mr. Asif Ibrahim, Chairman of Chittagong Stock Exchange. Asif Ibrahim is currently the Chairman of Chittagong Stock Exchange. He is a former President of Dhaka Chamber of Commerce and Industry and former first Chairman of Business Initiative Leading Development, or BUILD. He is also the Vice Chairman of New Age Group of Industries, a business house involved in manufacturing and exporting ready-made garments, textile, and plastic products from Bangladesh. Mr. Asif Ibrahim, welcome to the panel. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Vijay, for inviting me.
And lastly, I'd like to welcome Dr. Nasiruddin Ahmed, former Chairman of National Board of Revenue. Dr. Nasiruddin Ahmed is currently working as a Senior Fellow of Practice at the BRAC Institute of Governance and Development, BIGD, under BRAC University. He was the Commissioner of Anti-Corruption Commission, SEC Bangladesh. Prior to joining the SEC, he was the Secretary, Internal Resource Division, Ministry of Finance, and Chairman of the National Board of Revenue. He also worked for the government in the Ministry of Housing and Public Works, Rural Electrification Board, Economic Relations Divisions, Prime Minister's Office, and Bangladesh Public Administration Training Center. Dr. Nasiruddin Ahmed, a warm welcome you for joining the panel.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. I'll just kick off the discussion. So my first question would be to Dr. Masrur Reaz, Chairman, Policy Exchange. Masrur Bhai, you have seen the current drop in business sentiment. What do you think should be our strategy for generating new employment and economic growth? And what should be the the strategy for absorbing the migrant workers who are coming back, and we are predicting a fall of remittances as well. How can Bangladesh tackle this aftermath of the remittance fallout? And because a lot of the businesses, houses that we've interviewed are saying they will not make new hires. Masrur Bhai, over to you.
Thank you, Vision. Lots of questions, but all good questions and highly relevant. So how much do I have for each round? 3-4 minutes? Right,
Masrur Bhai will be having a 3 to 4 minutes for all speakers, and we'll do a couple of rounds for everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Vijan. So first of all, a big congratulations to the LightCastle team for bringing out the third consecutive Business Confidence Index. I still remember my conversation, I think, with Ivdad, Bijan, and Zahed right before your first confidence index came out back in 2017, and I was very fortunate to be able to join your first launch as well. I think that happened in the Daily Star premises, who were your partners. And I give a lot of kudos to LightCastle for sustaining this important initiative. Bangladesh in general has a severe lack of data. And one way data are produced around the world in developed and emerging countries is in the form of indicators or indices. From when I was part of the World Bank Group, with the help of Mr. Asif, Ibrahim, and Barrister Nihad Kabir, both of whom are former chairman of BUILD, the Public-Private Dialogue Forum, we had one indicator rolled out, but it was really encouraging to see private sector institutions such as LightCastle coming up and rolling out an index and sustain that. And this year's one comes at an even more critical time, where the relevance of this index and the insights that come out through this index could not have been more important in terms of time, in terms of relevance, given COVID's impact on economy and the sluggish outlook we have. So employment, indeed, Zahed made an excellent presentation in terms of data, in terms of analysis, in terms of outlook. It is very clear the economic slowdown is real and present. There are many aspects of this economic shock, but the way many analysts, policymakers see, the biggest casualty of this economic slowdown is actually employment. And also, this is going to have the most negative, in a negative way, most profound impact on the overall economic growth as well as economic recovery. How the employment losses as well as employment recreation or reconstruction are managed will determine how soon and how broad-based the recovery is going to be in the coming years. Global figures, ILO as of June predicts about 305 million jobs lost. Bangladesh has a few sort of small or intermediate studies. According to the most comprehensive one, BIDS came out with that 3 weeks ago. I think it's 16 million jobs lost. Now, Bangladesh has a total job of about 60 million, formal, informal together. If 16 million jobs lost by early June, that's already 1/4 or almost 1/4, right? And these jobs or employment has been, the private sector led jobs and employment has been the main way out or mainstay of Bangladesh's very robust and impressive development success over the last several decades. And if employment gets lost, Bangladesh's development aspiration as well as the foundation both gets severely affected. Obviously, within the employment category, the hardest hit are the ones who are on the low income side, who actually sustain on daily income or daily wages. Due to the lack of supply, fall in supply and demand both in the economy. Now, how do you get them back? In short term or in the immediate term, where we still have part of the crisis, the health shock prevailing, virus has not disappeared, vaccine has not come, 50% of the economy or the population probably are still in some form of self-restriction. At this period, employment protection is going to be the most important factor. Now, stimulus does have some element of employment protection, but it's very limited. The employment protection is particularly targeted for export sectors, the 5,000 crore taka, which is primarily targeted to help exporters pay off their employees. This could have been and should be made broad-based. If you look at the stimulus around the world, developed ones like Canada, US, UK, or even India, or emerging ones like Malaysia and Thailand, they all have a big employment protection element in their stimulus, which is going to the enterprises in order for them to sustain their employee bases. And they have been made, even in many countries, they have been made directly linked to the access to this stimulus. So Bangladesh could actually do better on that. Second, rural economy, which is also linked to your migrant issue. Migrants are returning both from outside the country, but also from the urban centers, because urban centers like Dhaka, Chittagong, they have lost a lot of these low daily wage income jobs, and they're returning to the rural areas. So rural economy needs to be rejuvenated. And agriculture is one way, but the non-farm, but non-agriculture part of the rural economy is also very important. So we see some ray of hope in the national budget that was announced. There is additional allocation for agriculture. There is additional allocation for migrant workers who are returning through Polli Kormoshanstan Bank, Polli Sanchoy Bank, about 2,500 crore or $300 million. I think that's very good, but that needs to be disbursed to the right people. And who do you disburse it to? The jobs are going to come from mainly in the rural area, cottage and micro industries, perhaps some small. So that takes me to the third point, that support to see cottage, micro and small industries are going to be extremely important. Medium to some extent as well, but this large part of these lost livelihoods and employment are really in the cottage and micro. Now, what we see there are pots of money available in the stimulus, but they're not being disbursed in a very fast rate. So that needs to be expedited. Second, I think the regulatory burden needs to be reduced on small businesses. For example, VAT, it's one of the highest on small businesses in Bangladesh. After paying, I think, 4% turnover, high VAT on, advanced VAT on import, the concept of advanced VAT doesn't exist anywhere in the world outside Bangladesh. And then almost 15% above 3 crore. This is very, very taxing on SMEs. So the regulatory burden, including tax, needs to be reduced. Thirdly, the world of recovery is going to be digital. Zahed mentioned that Bangladesh's cottage, micro, and small businesses are very disconnected from digital means of business, and recovery would need end-to-end digitalization from supply chain management to business and the books, and then sort of forward linkages. So there needs to be digital means to SMEs. And finally, linkages, 2 ways. One, in the next couple of years, when private demand are going to be little less, government is going to be a dominant buyer around the world and in Bangladesh. So government needs to come up with a strategy to bring in small enterprises in its procurement plan, which would help small enterprises to create more jobs. And similarly, small and micro enterprises in the supply chain linkage of the foreign investors and large flagship businesses are going to be extremely helpful. So let me stop there and I'll come back in the second round. Thank you.
Thank you, Masrur. I think what I always like from your kind of analysis that you cover from regulation to digitalization to employment. So I like that we have a broad spectrum of views. And I think the importance that is being placed on the CMSE is rightly founded because they generate the most employment. Next, I would like to move on to Barrister Nihad Kabir. Again, Nihad, thank you for joining. I'm sure you hear this question a lot, but I'm going to ask you again. You know, Bangladesh has always found it difficult to attract quality FDIs, which is currently less than 1% of the GDP. But our neighbor India, even during the pandemic, has been, attracting a lot of FDIs. We have all heard how Jio has, made Mukesh Ambani the 6th most richest person in the world. Google, Facebook, everyone is investing in India. So given the pandemic, and given in this case, a lot of the large technology companies has a bit of liquidity all over the world, what can Bangladesh do differently that can, change our position and can become a potential investment destination? What factors should we watch out for given the current crisis?
Thank you very much. First of all, thank you for inviting me today. And it's a very interesting report. I spent quite a bit of time yesterday going through it. But I suppose it is a snapshot in time, the report, and it is heavily informed by the immediate effects of this pandemic. So to an extent, what it has done, this pandemic has done, if I look at your question from another point of view, is that it has brought out into stark relief where the weaknesses in our the economy are and where the strengths are also. And also it has shown us where we need to change our business practices and how we can do that to take advantage of what is happening globally in the global economy. Bangladesh is not the only country which is going to be affected. And funnily enough, we just got a message from one of the leading chamber presidents showing the amount of FDI that India seems to have got in the last few weeks. And I was having a quiet laugh myself because a few weeks ago, I don't know if any of you noticed, there's this meme going around that if President Donald Trump had to have a tea party for industry leaders in the US, he would have to serve samosas. Because I think other than one, I think about a dozen of the top companies are all headed by Indians, the Indian diaspora. And so that really creates a lot of momentum in getting investment, foreign direct investment into India. But talking about Bangladesh, this has been a fundamental question for a long time. On paper, not just now, but for the last 20, 25 years, we have had perhaps one of the best regulatory regimes for foreign exchange, for example, in this region. We have had a phenomenal economic growth. We have a very strong domestic market now. We have a country which geographically is situated in a manner that distribution costs within Bangladesh are very, very low. Yet, and there are several companies, global companies, for whom Bangladesh is one of their best performing units. Talk about Unilever, you talk about Nestle, you talk about PepsiCo, you talk about Standard Chartered Bank. I was expecting to see Nasir here today. Many other companies, including Grameenphone, for example, Telenor. But somehow there is a perception, and we have not been able to get rid of the perception that Bangladesh is not a good place to do business in. And this is because we do talk a very good talk. Our government functionaries, government agencies, we ourselves go out and say that Bangladesh is great, we have these facilities, come and invest. But we don't walk the talk. We say that you will get XYZ regulatory permission, but when it comes to it, instead of getting that permission in a week, it may take 6 months. And all these things have created this perception, and it's not just a perception issue, it is a real issue. I deal with a lot of foreign investors, and the two things they say regularly is that one is that our taxation structure is completely unpredictable. Masrur referred to VAT. That is something that is changed within the year, within the financial year. It appears whimsically at the behest of various interests, so that investors cannot do proper financial planning. I was in a board meeting yesterday of a foreign investor, and the cost of a particular capex went up by 4 crores just because an SRO regarding VAT was changed. And the foreign investors were scratching their heads and saying, how can we do any planning in that manner? Income tax is another issue where you've also, the presenter also mentioned, the rates are higher in Bangladesh functionally than in any other country in this region. We have said this many, many times. I'm saying this again, that our businesses are suffering and our FDI attractiveness is suffering due to the weaknesses of the National Board of Revenue in making tax policy and in collecting revenue. The same agency is responsible for doing both, and they, in my humble opinion, do not have the capacity to make proper tax policy. And the other issue that foreign investors are always talking about is our foreign exchange regulations. Although, as I said, at one point we had the best foreign exchange regulations in the region. But again, our issue is actually the practice of it. What is in the books is good, but when it comes to actually applying it, our regulators do not necessarily follow their own regulations. So these are issues which will continue to block us from getting foreign direct investment in any significant quantity. We can say as much as we like that we are a great place to come and invest in. The proof of the pudding is in the eating. And finally, in this particular context, foreign investors look at how domestic investors are investing in our economy. And your report has said, we have seen over the last several years that private sector investment in Bangladesh has remained stagnant as a percentage of GDP. And foreign investors look at it and say, why? And unless we can answer that question, they are not going to come into Bangladesh. So we have this issue. Part of it is perception, a lot of it is reality, and we need to address these issues if we are going to get FDI. Recently, a lot of talk about countries leaving China, particular country giving incentives to its companies to relocate to other countries, including Laos, including Cambodia, where I personally know the infrastructure is not up to our standards. But again, it has been a perception issue. We just are not up there in delivering what we promised to deliver. So I'm going to stop on that now and possibly come back later on the specific sectors that we can talk about.
Thank you, Barrister Nihad, Kabir. I think that was very useful. Two of the broad takeaways: we need to walk the talk at what point we are in, and the perception issue that we have that needs to be changed as well. Next, I'm going to move on to Mr. Asif Ibrahim, Chairman of Chittagong Stock Exchange. First of all, definitely Asif bhai for a bit of comment on the report. But secondly, kind of like a difficult question that you're throwing to you as well, that we have seen our largest export engine faltering on supply chain disruptions, fallout in orders, and credit crunch. How do you see the RMG textile sector tackle the pandemic in the current scenario? And what is your projections for the future in 2021? And what does it mean for Bangladesh?
Thank you very much, LightCastle, for inviting me to this discussion. The Business Confidence Report. I believe I had the honor of attending the one you first launched a few years ago, if I recollect properly. The report that you have compiled, the presentation that was shown is quite comprehensive. You have covered the entire gamut of the COVID-related effect in the economy across different sectors. You have covered both domestic as well as exports, and also had brought in the issue of remittances from abroad. So in general, I think it's quite a comprehensive report, and I congratulate you for this compiling this analysis. In terms of your question, I would like to first start off with some figures. According to BGMEA, we had 465 of the factories reporting who has got employment of about 3.7 million workers. And they had initially reported cancellation of $9 billion worth of orders. But the good news is that 43.5% of those orders have been reinstated to the tune of about $4 billion. But there is also a flip side of it. Some of the major buyers like JCPenney, Sears, Debenhams. JCPenney and Sears are US based. Debenhams is of course UK based. Then La Halle, I think, is from France. Nygaard and La Quenue is also from France. They have become bankrupt. So that is also something to be concerned about. In terms of the the buyers who have really stood by us, the number one would be Levi's of USA. They have reinstated 97.5% of their orders. H&M has reinstated almost 89.4% of their orders, and the others are, also trying to support. Philip Van Heusen, who's a big buyer of USA, they have reinstated 75.3% of the orders, and Next, which is a renowned UK brand, have also reinstated 83.2% of the orders. Primark is one of the low-end buyers, but they buy in bulk from a lot of factories. They have reinstated only 41.7% of the orders. So you can see that the analysis that was done, I think it was a comprehensive total of about 31 buyers. You can see that there is a difference amongst all regarding the difference amongst most of them regarding how they have responded to the situation and have reverted back to us in terms of their continued support to Bangladesh. Now, in terms of your projection, you have projected, I think, 27.9 for FY ending 2021 or 2020, I can't recollect, because it's going to end in June 30, 2021. This FY, we have already started. We are on the 23rd day. I think your analysis is quite okay. Up to December, we had predicted December of 2020. From January to December 2020, it will be in the range of 23 to 24 billion dollars. So let's see how we end up at the end. In terms of going forward, there are certain strategies that we need to undertake. Certainly, we have to engage in more economic diplomacy. This is an area where we feel right now our foreign missions can play a very important role, reaching out to the associations of the buyers who are there in those countries and reaching out through the intergovernmental procedures, engaging with them. We have to focus more on exporting to USA, because primarily we see that still majority of our exports are in the European Union, but the bigger pie is US, and the clear growth of the Vietnam exports of RMG to shows us that America is a big market, and they have actually come very close and overtaking us in that regard very soon. So we have to focus on that. We are heavily dependent very much on cotton-based fabric. That is one of our weakness. On the knitwear sector, we have achieved significant amount of backward linkage, but on the woven sector, we haven't achieved that much. But we have to concentrate on man-made fiber-based apparel. That is where the global demand and trend is being is growing, and we need to emphasize on that. Recent report by PricewaterhouseCoopers, they have done a comprehensive study. I don't know if you have come across it. It clearly shows that MMF-based apparel is going to be the trend of the future. We have to concentrate on online orders. Because of this COVID pandemic, well, before COVID pandemic, one could see that the high street retail shops were being closed down because of the competitiveness issue and the rising rents in those, those are very expensive to maintain. And the shift has been more, ordering in the website and getting it delivered at home. In some cases, it even gets delivered by drone in USA. Amazon has reached that level that you order it and it comes and flies in drone in your house. So we have to emphasize on to be able to, cater to that market. It's going to be very challenging because it will mean that we'll have to do very smaller runs of production. Bangladeshi factories are not equipped to do smaller runs. We cannot turn these orders down. So if we want to do these smaller runs, we have to go for modular production lines, and so that we can service these boutique orders. We also have to go for lean manufacturing. We have to be more vigilant about trimming down the excesses and the wastages that we have. We have to focus on increased productivity. If we can do all these, then perhaps we can sort of try to rebound on the exports market. However, a very sad news is that close to 300 factories in this process, before even the pandemic had started, after this current board had taken over, we have done an analysis, and 300 factories had shut down because of they are not being very competitive. In Bangladesh, we tend to have very big capacity. We do not do enough analysis of projections of markets, and we do our investment judgments based on whims, which is something I think the industry is suffering right now. So we have to be more analytical. We have to actually engage people like you who can do surveys and come up with credible reports so that we can take advantage of that. You had mentioned about the leather sector. Leather sector, I personally feel sometimes very frustrated because leather and footwear had crossed the $1 billion threshold a couple of years ago. And then we shifted into reverse gear because of the fact that the Savar leather city, which is being handled by BCI, is in utter shambles. They haven't been able to fix the central effluent treatment plant there. And because of that, Barrister Nihad, Kabir and myself, we had made a visit there last year. When you walk into it, I was utterly shocked. How can an export processing zone where you're expecting to export quality footwear from, quality leather from, look like that? So I think it was a big mistake to give it to BCI to begin with. Not to be quoted, but Honorable Prime Minister at one point had said that Bangladesh bolchi je BCI to 6টা টাকার কাজ করতে পারে না, তাকে কেন সাভার লেদার সিটির দায়িত্ব দেওয়া হয়েছে? So if we can't fix that, then we'll be in trouble. I would strongly recommend that the responsibility of that zone is given to BESA or BEBSA, so that those who are experts in developing infrastructure like that are given that responsibility. Remittances. I had a discussion with some of the officials, I think a few weeks ago, where they had mentioned that of the returning workforce who are coming back to Bangladesh, they are giving them some sort of an incentive of 5 lakh taka each to go back to the villages where they hail from to set up either small businesses or a startup capital. If that can be implemented and they're guided through a proper process, that could be beneficial going forward. In terms of the capital market, some of the overarching issues of the capital market actually are long-standing. They are actually from pre-COVID days. We very recently had a dialogue from Research in Bangladesh about capital markets. And we have discovered that we really need to emphasize the need for taking up these long due action plans that we have outstanding to develop the capital market of Bangladesh. Capital market strengthening is the requirement in line with Bangladesh's development aspirations. Only currently 25% of the investments in our country are financed by formal financial sector, including capital market. And future growth of Bangladesh needs more private financing for infrastructure, for health, for new technology-oriented sectors. Housing is an area where we need public financing from the capital market, but we haven't gotten there yet. Yeah, I think to be able to, and rehab also is in a very big, very sad situation. The entire housing sector of this country. I've had discussions with one of the founders of rehab, Mr. Ashi Haider, and they are very frustrated because there is no long-term financing for housing. A country of Bangladesh, we say that we are aspiring middle-income country. We are moving up economically, but where is for a job holder to be able to buy a flat, paying a mortgage over a long period of time? We still don't have that mechanism in this country, so we need to work on that. Coming back to the capital market, I think we need to create opportunity for healthy companies to come into the capital market. This would require very strong valuation methods. We should allow greenfield projects. We should allow SME caps and regulatory and tax incentives for these companies to come into the market. We have to bring in more institutional investors in the market to increase the liquidity. Barrister Nihad Kabir had made a very strong comment in that dialogue, and she, because of the nature of her work, has to deal with a lot of foreign investors, for those who are interested to frontier fund managers. And those people, they have actually said that you can actually count in your two hands the number of securities in Bangladesh which are worthwhile. So that is actually very, very alarming. So we need to address that issue. We have to have the banks come in more. The government had instructed them to bring in 200 crore taka into the capital market. We've heard from the BCI chairman in the last meeting that about 12 or 13 banks have already sanctioned that in their board meeting. So let's hope that money comes into the market. Digital transformation of the entire process of trading is a must. Now, this gives me enormous pain personally, being the chairman of a stock exchange where we had to remain shut for 66 days. It's like you allowing somebody to deposit money in the bank and then you're shutting the bank down and they can't have access to the fund. At that time, particularly from end of March until April, May, June, many people needed fiscal liquidity in their hands. And say, for example, maybe they had 80,000 takas worth of shares through a brokerage house, through a BO account, but they couldn't cash in. I think they were even willing to cash in at 60,000 or 50,000. They needed the money, but we didn't give them the opportunity to do so because we have to keep the market shut. Why? Because we don't have the necessary technology put in place to trade online. Certainly, digital transformation is a must. We must increase the ICT capability of not only the Securities and Exchange Commission, but the stock exchanges, the brokerage houses. Very encouraging that Professor Shibli Rubaiyat the other day mentioned that he sort of also indicated, showing his palm, that within a few years or a year or year and a half, we should be able to trade online on your palm top. So let's see if we can get there. Regulatory governance is a major issue that needs to be improved. We have to set up accountability. We have to strengthen the financial standards. We have to better link to Financial Reporting Council, which has been set up, avoiding regulatory capture and intervention. I had suggested in that meeting that in terms of when IPO valuation will be done going forward, it should not be only BSEC's territory. There should be a committee including members from Dhaka Stock Exchange, Chittagong Stock Exchange, Financial Reporting Council, Association of the Brokers, and other institutional investors who are market players. And we have to go for a physical inspection of the premises of the factories or the companies who want to list. The valuation of the IPO or the shares that will come into the market has to be just, so that we give the investors in the market an opportunity to have a level playing field. The way it stands now, we are not being able to do that. I think I have covered most of what I wanted to say regarding what you wanted to hear regarding. You asked me two questions, one about RMG and the primary major sector, and about the capital markets. I hope this satisfies your queries. Thank you.
Thank you, Asif Bhai, for going into details on RMG textile, leather footwear, remittance, housing, capital markets, digital transformation, compliance and governance. I think, again, thank you for coming back this year as well. Last year, you were also there, putting your valuable comments. And again, we appreciate all the guidance that you have provided us with. I would move on to our last panelist, Dr. Nasruddin Ahmed. Sir, thank you for coming. Again, posing a difficult question as to all the panelists. We know that Bangladesh has been going through a budget deficit for a while, and for the current budget fiscal as well. So there has been talks of issuing sovereign or infrastructure bonds to finance this deficit. So my question would be it be a wise idea? And add on to that, do you think it would be also good to raise further foreign debt at this point, or dip into our forex savings to finance our budget deficit as well? Sir, over to you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. At the outset, I would like to congratulate LightCastle for launching a very commendable job, Business Confidence Index 2020. Actually, the questions are very pertinent. You see that we know that sustained economic growth is only possible within a sound macroeconomic framework. But the higher budget deficit, which was mentioned in the budget speech and which is going to happen, the budget deficit is definitely a threat to our macroeconomic fundamentals. Yes, actually, the issuing sovereign bonds is a very important issue. While I worked at the government, the finance ministry was thinking of issuing something like that, but I think it didn't come out. It actually, what we are doing, we need money. So we are borrowing money from the market, and that is guaranteed by the government, sovereign guarantee. If you look at the sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria started, you see the growth is very high, and many of the countries, Nigeria, South Africa, Senegal, and others, they have got the sovereign, these bonds, and that is very helpful for raising money from the market, because we need the money. So this is, I think, but of course there are certain risks are there, like the credit worthiness, ability to repay, what are the countries, exchange rate. So there are a lot of things are there, but still, my opinion is that the government should use, because we need to develop the bond market, very shallow, small bond market. So the bond market should be, and so that we must reduce our dependence on the banking sector gradually and go for the other. So definitely I go for that, and we can have, and even in India, if you look at the sovereign gold bonds in India, that was sold like the hot cake. So it can be denominated in local currency or foreign currency. In India, it is denominated in gold. So I think this is a very innovative product that the government can adopt. Secondly, the foreign exchange reserve or foreign borrowing. This is a very important thing. I think we have seen that, you have seen our Honorable Prime Minister, she expressed her interest in investing money from the foreign exchange reserve. So as a student of economics, actually, since we have got a good, that is our only healthy sign, the high in COVID-19, still we have got very good high foreign exchange reserve. But how much we can invest in infrastructure or other, financing government deficit, budget deficit, that. So actually we have to understand the economics of the budget constraint. What is that? Actually, if we use excessively the foreign exchange reserve, so that may create a problem in balance of payments. So that is, again, we are already strained under that. And secondly, is that appreciation of taka, a local currency. And you know that if taka appreciates against dollar and other currencies, so that will have impact, negative impact on export earnings and increasing imports. So that exports is already in problem, declining trend. So foreign exchange reserve, we can use that. But again, we have to look that where we are going to invest, how much we are going to invest, because that is an item, not in the external sector. You see, economics is divided into certain sectors. So this is budget deficit in the fiscal sector, but that is in the external sector of the economy. So we have to be very cautious about that. Some countries have used that, but with very cautiously. Otherwise, that will lead to the problem, the crisis, the balance of payment. Even research has shown the flight of capital also happened, in some countries. So, we have to think whether how much foreign exchange reserve we should think cautiously, make analysis, and the quantum, where we are going to invest that. So that is very important. So, so that needs further analysis, of course, very important. Yeah, I think so. This is up to this. So I can go for further. I have got another question. So thank you very much for up to this. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Nasir Ahmed. And I think you rightly pointed out that using these instruments or the forex reserve, it's a balancing act. And again, thank you. I think we have a lot of questions for the panel as well. We'll do another round of question and then take those questions from the audience. Again, back to you, Masrur bhai. Again, asking a difficult question as usual. We know that the policymakers are thinking about the energy policy, given that there has been a large gap in demand and supply of power. And during the COVID crisis, we are also seeing that the mix and everything, the demand is also changing. Do you think in light of this, we need a fresh power sector master plan? What role will renewable energy kind of play in that energy mix? And how can government think about reducing subsidies in the energy sector?
Thank you, Bijan. I think I'll try to be even more brief this time. I can see we're just 10-12 minutes away from the open discussion. So I think renewable is an important, sort of element of power and energy discourse, not only in Bangladesh, but around the world. Bangladesh, I mean, there is the issue of environmental sustainability, but then there is also the issue of resource efficiency, because the non-renewable, they take up lots of finite resources. So, you know, energy security also come into play when you are actually dealing with finite energy resources that are required for the production of energy. Now, in Bangladesh's case, Bangladesh currently has a target of 10% production of its total power in the form of renewable energy. That's not going to happen by 20, because we are already in 2020, right? The 10% would mean about 2,000 megawatt, because one thing we have to acknowledge that that Bangladesh has done a tremendous progress over the last 10, 12 years in terms of increasing its overall power generation capacity. I think from 5,000 to 6,000 megawatts in 2007-8, it has come to 20,000 by 2019 or early this year. Although the you know, the production at any given point of time is around 11,000, but that's a massive improvement. And we see I think the reduced load shedding, at least in household, if not in the factories, is a good testament to that. Now, original target of the Bangladesh government or Bangladesh Power Department was to go for 5% of renewable by 2015. We missed that target. That did not happen. And then the current target is not going to be met either, 10% by this year. 10% would mean, as I said, almost 2,000 megawatt. But currently, we have only 560 megawatt of renewable energy in production, out of which about 286 megawatt is in off-grid. Off-grid is not extremely efficient. It is good for households, rural households, or households in remote areas. It's helpful, but overall energy strategy, energy strength of a country, the off-grid is not extremely helpful. So if you really look at grid energy coming through renewable, it's about less than, it's less than 300 megawatt. Now, question is, how do we get to sort of more production? Now, one reassuring fact is that another 557 megawatt of projects, I think maybe 10 or 12 projects, are currently approved and under some form of preparation or construction. As and when they come in, I think the renewable energy will get to double the production that we have now. But that is still not going to be what we have as our target, which is 10%. A couple of big constraints. One, land is a big issue, because big part of our renewable strategy is based on solar. Now, solar is something that requires huge amount of land, usually 4 or 5 acres for each megawatt. Now, Bangladesh is a very land constrained country. It's small country, large population, food security is important, so you cannot touch arable land. So perhaps there needs to be rethinking about mix of renewables. For example, Bangladesh produces least amount of hydropower in entire Asia. Can we increase that? If we cannot, can we bring hydropower from Nepal through regional negotiations with India and Nepal? Wind is something that Bangladesh has not explored at all. The assessment says 20,000 megawatt can be actually produced by wind energy. That's something we have not explored. It's expensive, but it is feasible for a country like Bangladesh because it doesn't take up a lot of land. So that's where I think we are on renewable, but we have to step up. On subsidy, very briefly, I think now COVID is creating huge pressure on government finances, on fiscal, something Dr. Nasir Uddin also mentioned. I think the government's ability to give subsidies in sectors where it may not be needed or can be minimized needs to come into serious consideration. So I think subsidies on one hand need to be better targeted. It cannot be or should not be for entire population or for the population who are more fortunate. That's one way of minimizing that. But also I think appropriate pricing of energy as well as power and also segment-based pricing is also going to help address the subsidy. Let me stop there.
Thank you, Masrur bhai. I think thank you for touching in details about the renewable segment, why solar might not be the right choice for us. And thank you again for mentioning segment-based pricing. I'll now move on to Barrister Nihad Kabir. Nihad, a lot of our respondents have cited that what got us here over the last 20 years won't take us into the next decade. In your opinion, which sectors do you think would play a critical role at the dawn of the new decade for Bangladesh? As per the business sentiment survey, we can see that pharmaceuticals, agro-processing, and ICT, ITS, digital services, including fintech, has been identified as the top sectors.
Yes, thank you, Vijay. That's a good question. And I took note, I took the liberty of taking a screenshot of slide number 21, where this was shown very well in the report presentation. And to an extent, the promising sectors have been identified rightly. Pharmaceutical, for example, has an advantage, A, because we have several world-class factories, pharmaceutical plants, but B, also, most importantly, is that the restrictions and TRIPS don't apply to us till I think it's 2031 or 2033, which will give us an advantage for the next decade. But once TRIPS comes in and starts applying to our pharmaceutical industry, what sort of advantage we have will depend on how we are retooling or how we are looking at that industry growing in the next 10 years or so. Asif Ibrahim spoke about the leather sector. I also want to mention this because over the last several years, every year the government has been declaring one or other industry as the industry of the year. And leather has been one of those industries, pharmaceuticals has been one of those industries. But we find, unfortunately, that these declarations are merely lip service. Targeted, effective policy supports are not given. Asif has rightly mentioned, and this is one of the glaring examples, that it has taken us 12 years and 654 plus stackers, and we still have not been able to move the tanneries properly from Hazaribagh to Savar. And that does not look like happening for another quite a few months. So our target of getting $5 billion from the leather sector is not going to materialize. We don't want that to happen to these other industries. One of the sectors, I saw a question from the floor also, which has a lot of potential actually, is agro-processing. And there are regional countries who want certain agro-processed products from Bangladesh, but again, we need proper policy support and we need the proper infrastructure for putting those in place. But having said all that, there are some industries, I think, which we are missing out on here, which are the service sectors. I can see from here, other than the ICT, IT related and digital financial services, we are missing out on service sectors, for example, in the health and elderly care, not just in Bangladesh, but globally. There's a huge demand. And as you know, as we always say, we have a very young population, which can be properly trained. There is a huge scope there. There's a huge scope in the hospitality industry, again, domestically, as well as globally. But all of these depend on the skills training and retraining that we are going to be doing in the next decade, as well as a fundamental shift in our system of education and in our mindset about what we want our education system to deliver. What we are getting now is out of our education system is not suitable to bridge the gap between employability on the one hand, creating entrepreneurs on the other hand, and actually what is available in the job markets. We need to be able to look forward, do proper analysis of what the job market will demand in the next decade or 2 decades. We will need to look to see what are the skills which will be required from people to allow them to create jobs rather than just look for jobs. And again, to repeat something which we say almost in every program, that every year, 2 to 3 million people enter our job market, and our industry is not going to grow fast enough. Our economy is not going to grow fast enough to give everybody wage employment. So we need to create job creators as well. And for that, a very nimble education system which teaches our people analytical skills, communication skills, and problem-solving skills is required. What we don't need is people memorizing hundreds of books for 16 years, coming out with a certificate, and then going looking for jobs. We don't need that. As I said the first time round also, this pandemic has shown us where the skill, where the strengths and weaknesses of not just our economy, but of our whole skill and education sectors are also. And if we can take the opportunity to address that, we will be able to not only just look for jobs or look for employment in the sectors which have been identified by you in your report, said pharmaceutical, agro-processing, etc., but to explore new sectors. Again, I'm going to say that as we retool our business practices, new opportunities will arise, but we will need to have the policy support. Agriculture will remain and should remain a mainstay and a backstop because, you know, throughout this whole COVID last 3-4 months, agriculture is a sector which, although it has suffered, is the one sector which really never wholly closed down in the country. So that is why agriculture and agro-processing should definitely be one of the major focal points going forward. Once again, even to the extent of boring all of you, but I have to say that whatever it is not the specific industries that we necessarily need to look at, we need to look at how we are training our people. And then they will be able to identify the opportunities and go ahead. We cannot predict every opportunity that is going to arise over the next 10, 12, 15 years. The business scenario locally and globally is changing that fast. Thank you.
Thank you, Barrister Nihad Kabir. I think you ended on a very strong note that, you know, at the end of the day, our education system, building the right kind of human capital will become very important for taking Bangladesh to the next decade. That will allow us to kind of adapt to the new global change. At this point, I will definitely open up the floor and take some of the questions. We have a lot of questions, I think close to 30 questions that I can see in my window right now that my team has shortlisted from here and social media outlets. Asif bhai, I would like to move a question from the audience to you. And I think it's also in line of some of the questions they asked. It's regarding the digital sector. They have mentioned that currently, even during the pandemic, there is a high optimism on the digital sector, both from a private demand, consumer demand, as well as from the public side, especially in digital financial services. The question was, how can the government and other stakeholders take the most of this opportunity and make digital kind of more in mainstream for Bangladesh?
Overall, we have the Digital Bangladesh strategy, and we've set up these union-level digital centers across the country, and I think we have quite a decent infrastructure network put in place. I remember at one particular point we were producing enough bandwidth so that we were thinking of exporting some of the bandwidths to our neighboring country, particularly the eastern part of India. So that in terms of the infrastructure, we are there, but in terms of implementing it in practices, particularly in the capital market, which I had talked about in my earlier intervention, is still yet where we need to be. Fintech is going to be the way forward, and we have to be able to adapt ourselves. It is very sad that how many days it takes for us now to settle a share transaction. It's T+2, that is transaction plus 2 days. I mean, this is utterly ridiculous in this day and age. Why would somebody need to wait for 2 days for settlement of a transaction of buying a share in the capital market? So we have to be able to bring in those technologies which are very much there in the developing economies as well as in the developed economies to be able to suit ourselves to embrace those technologies. The platform is there. It's just a matter of implementing it. It's a matter of getting the policies put in place. And one thing that we need to come out of is over-regulating. I think because of the fact the way our current bureaucracy is set up, you know, it's inherited the old British civil service, and then the Indian civil service, and the Bangladesh civil service, and you know, we've grown up hearing this story that, and Nasir, please don't take it, otherwise I know you're in the panel, the former chairman of NBR. But the first reaction of any bureaucrat for any proposal that comes to the table is how to say no. So we have to come out from that mindset. We have to analyze the potentiality of a good proposal, a potentiality of a good company, potentiality of a good investment. And we must, you know, give it our best to attract those opportunities. Because of this COVID situation and the US-China trade war, tremendous relocation opportunities had opened up. And Indonesia is one of the biggest beneficiaries of that opportunity. I have been hearing reports in different platforms today that India, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, is also vying for a huge chunk of that foreign direct investment. So we also need to embrace ourselves. I somehow feel, and I'm being very candid here, that you know, where we stand in terms of our growth aspirations, certainly the soft infrastructure is not there yet. The soft infrastructure needs to have a total overhaul and, you know, reset and reboot, as the way you reboot a central processing unit of a computer. We have to reboot the mindset of the soft infrastructure if we are to go ahead with the trajectory of 8.2% this year, and then subsequently grow to the desired objective of being a fully developed country by the year 2041, a vision of our Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Thank you.
Thank you, Asif Bhai. I would now move on to Dr. Nasruddin Ahmed. Sir, I wanted to ask a question, though it's not from one of the Q&As or to the panel, but, you know, this is something that, you know, we hear often, that the Doing Business Index in Bangladesh is critical to improve that, to incentivize private sector more. But, you know, we have been hearing that for a while. Given the current scenario of COVID, what are the key priority factors of the business Doing Business Index we should look at, and, you know, how should we you know, modulate them for private sector growth?
Mr. Vijon, basically, actually, I was listening to Asif Bhai's comments on bureaucracy, and he is absolutely correct. It is the negative mindset of the bureaucracy. You see, I am one of the panelists who has got bureaucratic orientation, though I never feel I am a bureaucrat like that. Masrur knows about me, so I try to behave like an academic and work like that. So that's a major problem. Now, your question is regarding the cost of doing business, the World Bank Doing Business Index, and that is a very key indicator, like Corruption Perception Index of Transparency International. World Bank's Doing Business is very important, because if any foreign investor wants to invest in Bangladesh, so naturally these indicators show that naturally that Bangladesh is not doing good in terms of cost of doing business. The cost is very high, delays are there, a lot of harassments here, you see. Actually, my about 37 years of my experience of working with the bureaucracy, senior positions, you see, chairman of REB, work secretary, NBR, Anti-Corruption Commission. Actually, so I tell you, as a practitioner, as a policy maker, actually, things government has got a lot of, largely, I should not say, why the index is scored so low, because a lot of dysfunctionalities there. Institutions, the mindsets. Nihad mentioned about the analytical skill. Late communication skill is there, but analytical skill is very much lacking in it. Because you have desktop research, certain research is needed, but which is not there. So the advocacy, look at the National Board of Revenue. You see where I worked. And you see, with the help of the IFC, Masrur, Reaz and others. So we had a 5-year strategic plan, modernization plan of the NBR. But when I left the NBR, everything remained as it is, nothing happened. So actually, so reform is the key, is very important. You see, you see, BIDA is there, other new organizations are coming. But that is incremental approach. Because in terms of the organization, in the software, what you call the mindset, the orientation, everything must be should be a overall change in the bureaucracy. And also, not only the bureaucracy, I must say, because my experience working at the NBR, even in the Anti-Corruption Commission, there are a lot of conflicts of interest, you see. And the political people, some, I should not say all, some, are responsible for this. And the nexus, that is a nexus between some unscrupulous officers, some political maybe leaders, and even some business people. This is very painful for them. So actually, and regarding the priority actually, so basically, from the perspective of the COVID-19, you see what I say, the turnover, the value addition, the contribution to the economy, so everything. So if you take the employment, so this is 25% contribution. This is the micro and SME sector, and if you add the cottage, it's a huge one. So, so the police, but if you look at the figure, most of them leave out the cottage, micro, you see, how much, even small, less than 40% of the small enterprises have access to the bank credit. That is the research finding. So, we want to give relief to them. That is very important. How to make things simple. Government has given, so you see, the stimulus package, concessional loan, refinancing loan, working capital fine, very sounds very nice. You see, but as a practitioner, how to get this? Lord, if you go to the bank, a lot of hassles, a lot of requirement, documentation, all these things, even in the COVID. So look at this, in Thailand or Indonesia, they have given tax relief. 6 months, you don't need to pay your interest, nothing, loan, no pay, suspension. So we have to do something tangible. And what Asif was mentioning, the digital solution. Mindset is a very difficult subject. Recently, I am teaching a subject on behavioral economics, but teaching behavioral economics is one thing, and changing behavior is another thing. So but still we have started the process. So and actually what you want, private sector led is the engine of any development. So our current investment private is around 23, 24. So if you have 26 or 27% investment as percentage of GDP, so it means huge. A lot of government has to be proactive, very much proactive. Not only the stimulus package, availability. I have given you package, no, not enough. Whether they are getting it, you just have some survey, online survey of the entrepreneurs. So, and putting the small and micro, especially in the focus. And Nihad was mentioning about the skills training, very important. Skills are changing. Government has set up this National Skills Authority, but I'm not sure these authorities may have some private sector people. Private sector, they have got, you see, what is called the new public management, the theory, because I teach at 2 universities, the theory. New public management tells not this bureaucratic, traditional Max Weber bureaucracy. So you just try to implement the private sector dynamism, the spirit essences in the public sector. Otherwise, the principle isn't problem will remain. The government, people are the principle in the constitution, but actually they are not the, so they become the agents and government officers become the principal. So the skill is very important, and also a lot of other things are there. So the 8th five-year plan is there. To be comments from this July, so they have doing some work on that. So I think we should have a long-term vision, because COVID has not come to go very quickly. And if it goes quickly, it will give some backup. So problem is that we have to have a 5-year plan, and the private sector, how it can we help the government, they themselves, the development partners. So all the ecosystem in online business is very important. Buyer-seller linkage. So bankers and entrepreneurs, how we are going to do the matchmaking. So basically, special credit scheme, all these are very important. So though I'm not a private sector people, but I feel, because I saw the working of the government is very problematic. Yeah, so, and my colleagues never liked my approach, because I was always, I try to call a spade a spade. So if we are paid by the citizens' money, you see, we get our salary from this, that is social accountability. So we have to keep that in mind. And now the government officers get higher salary, very good salary the government gives from the people's money, taxpayers' money. So that is, we have to utilize that. Then only then we can think that cost of doing business, definitely Bangladesh will go up. The corruption is a major issue, not only in NBR, Anti-Corruption Commission itself is plagued with corruption. You see, I work there. So a lot of corruption everywhere, more or less. So governance, whether it's the corporate governance or good, we call it good governance, whatever the term we use, actually we have to address that. Otherwise, we cannot get very good score in our doing business, and our focus should be on small, medium, and micro enterprise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. I think as you rightly mentioned, it's a whole ecosystem that we have to look at, and not just one particular segment. And thank you for detailing out those insights for us as well. At this point, I think we're almost at the end of the time. I think we have 5 more minutes. So I'm going to take a couple of open questions for the panel. Again, an open question to the panel, and feel free, Masrur Bhai, Barrister Nihad Kabir, Asif Bhai, Dr. Nasir Uddin, Ahmed, kindly feel free to jump in, anyone who wants to answer this. So I've received a question on international trade. It mentions that across the globe, following the pandemic, countries and trade blocs are looking inwards and moving towards protectionism and self-dependency. What does it mean for Bangladesh-based exporters? Should we be worried about this? And is it a kind of like an anti-globalization trade or not?
Can I take that?
Asif Bhai, please go ahead.
Yes, well, we have seen, we all know what happened to the Doha round, and a lot of lessons could be learned from there. In terms of the protectionism, obviously, the person who has put the question up is correct. We do tend to see protectionism led by, you can say, extreme right-wing political elements, coming into the government in many countries, and hence their policies are directed towards more, inward-looking. For Bangladesh, very interestingly, our venture into regional integration with SARC has been a total non-starter. We must look into a very strong or a lookist policy. I think ASEAN could be a trading bloc where we can look into as an example. And perhaps if we can try to strategize for an ASEAN +1 sort of a membership, or at least starting off with an observer status. I don't know whether we're there yet. Maybe Masrur can correct me if I'm wrong. That would be a good approach for us to take, because in the future, the century will belong to the Asia Pacific. You can clearly see that China is becoming a very strong global economic power, and with their Belt and Road Initiative, a lot of the emphasis will be on these countries which are part of this trading bloc. So for us, it would be wise to venture and look east and into ASEAN. Thank you.
So Bijan, just to add to Asif's excellent points very quickly. So yes, the COVID, two factors, in global geopolitics in the run up to COVID, which is very frankly, US-China sort of competition, let's call it positively, not tension. And also then COVID's, COVID has showed how concentrated source of supply chain can be a big problem for operations around the world. So this would lead, hopefully temporarily, to some level of deglobalization in the form of what's being called reshoring and nearshoring. So countries which have been sort of outsourcing productions or supply chains to, far away countries or regions for efficiency gains are, let's say, low cost or some other efficiency gains, are now going to move, at least, if not fully, I mean, fully might be very difficult, part of this supply chain production near their shore. So Europe might put more orders into Turkey. US might put more order into Mexico. So nearshoring, and some could be reshoring, basically bringing back within the borders of the buyer countries, right? So that's going to happen to some extent. Now, we can hope this is temporary, because eventually the globalization benefits have been well proven. It hopefully will come back, but in the short to medium term, to offset this effect, as Asif Bhai said, we need to look for new markets. ASEAN, China itself is a huge market. The Chinese ready-made garment market is $300 billion a year. And if we can get even 10%, 5% of that, that's almost half of our RMG export. And China has just offered us 97% our products, tax-free access. ASEAN membership, as Asif Bhai said. And most importantly, Bangladesh has zero bilateral foreign trade, free trade agreements, FTS, zero. India has 9, Vietnam has 12, and they're increasing. So without these free trade agreements, which then brings two countries together, we are going to be in tough waters in next few years, but also after LDC graduation, whenever that happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Masrur Bhai. Thank you, Asif Bhai. And again, I want to thank all of respected panelists. Being mindful of time, we have crossed the 125 mark. So though there's a lot of questions, we will again compile them and send it back to the panelists if they want to respond over email. But at this point, thanking everyone and handing over to you, Ifdad, to close the ceremony.
Bijom, thank you. Thank you all, the esteemed panelists, Masrur Bhai, Asif Bhai, Uddin Bhai, we are eternally grateful to you for sharing. I think this is going to help our audience able to put into action the thoughts that you have shared to take Bangladesh to the next decade. And it takes me back, at the closing of this session, it actually takes me back to the time of my conversation or incessant conversations with Masrur Bhai, who has been a great patron of our work ever since we started Business Confidence Index from back in 2016. I remember Masrur Bhai was working for the World Bank at that time, and now that he is the founder and chairman of Policy Exchange, he has been a great source of support. So it takes me back to the time when we first started exploring this whole concept of bringing along a tool, a document, a data-driven study that's going to lend a voice to the private sector of Bangladesh. And at LightCastle, we have always been a big believer of the notion that done is better than perfect. So we want to get things started. We believe that one action can spark 1,000 more. We are so grateful to Masrur Bhai for that, for his continuous support in helping us or in pushing us and encouraging us to keep on doing this publication on an annual basis. We understand because of the COVID situation, we unfortunately could not get as many interviews as we might have hoped for. But again, we believe this is a conversation starter nevertheless. So in my closing remarks, I just want to, drive that point home that together, if we all come behind each other and, act upon the data-driven insights that have come about from the study and from this discussion, we think this can bring about 1,000 more changes that's going to help Bangladesh come against this tide that we are facing right now because of the COVID situation. So my final vote of thanks, I will start off with the panelists, Nihad, Asif Bhai, Nasiruddin sir, Masrur Bhai once again. We are very grateful to you. Thank you for making the time, contributing to our initiative. We believe it's going to go a long way. We have plans to accumulate these thoughts from today's discussion and then, put it into long forms, put it into more documents, put it into more in the form of data-driven studies, and then, explore circulation of it through different media. So, and the business standard has come forward and been a partner of this initiative, and they want to explore this with us so that we can take your voice to more greater audience. So we are very thankful to the business standard for giving us that pathway. And not to mention the Youth Policy Forum, who's our outreach partner. They are also focusing on a lot of policy-driven discussions and talks, and we believe together in synergy with this kind of initiatives and studies, we can take it to the hands of the right people who will take Bangladesh rightfully to the next decade. And in the end, I want to thank all the 59 respondents who have given their time and shared valuable insights in preparation of this study. We are very grateful to you, dear sir and dear madam. And finally, the authors of this publication, led by Zahed, Sanjir, Saif, Mashiat, and Tanjim, who have done an excellent work in the preparation of this study. We commend you for that. Thank you, everyone, once again, for joining this discussion. We hope you found it as useful as we found it as exciting to be able to organize. Thank you so much once again. We will be in touch. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you, Iqbal, Vision, Zahed, and LightCastle team, and my fellow panelists and participants.
Thank you, everyone.